Welcome to Twists of Life, where every story has an unexpected turn. Stories of joy and sorrow, hope and redemption, just like the life we all live. Make yourself comfortable. It's time to begin. Male friendship is a special bond, understood only by those who have experienced its depth. For a man, such a comrade is often dearer than blood relatives. True friendship doesn't happen by chance and isn't ruined by petty quarrels. Once it takes root, it can last a lifetime, regardless of years and distance. That's exactly the kind of loyal friend a boy 2 years younger, who grew up in a disadvantaged family, was for James. Michael's parents often abused alcohol, leaving the boy and his two younger sisters unsupervised. Eventually, the children were placed in a state institution, from which Michael escaped after only a couple of weeks. However, that was enough time for his parents, forgetting about the children, to hastily leave their former place of residence for unclear reasons. The teenager categorically refused to return to the institution. He was barely over 14 at the time. He settled in the empty parental home, deciding to live independently. The guys who had known him since early childhood helped as best they could. They brought food and warm clothes. For a long time, they hid his escape, but the truth inevitably came out. The child welfare authorities returned the teenager to the state institution again. It was then that James managed to persuade his parents to help his childhood friend. Mr. Harrison, a former military man, was able to find distant relatives willing to take guardianship of the boy. Mrs. Harrison, a lawyer by profession, helped with the paperwork. From then on, these two became more than just buddies. People would say of them, they'd go through fire and water together. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, although they had concerns about such a friend, didn't voice their worries aloud to their son. James owed Michael his life. One day, they were by the river where the ice had melted significantly, but still seemed strong. James, who was taller and heavier, avoided the dangerous sections, but that didn't save him. The large boy in a heavy felt-lined coat and felt boots instantly went under the ice. Fortunately, he managed to surface and grab the edge. His clothes quickly soaked through and pulled him down, and his legs started cramping. Luckily, Michael didn't lose his head. They say that in moments of mortal danger, a person's hidden reserves open up. Apparently, this was just such a case. The thin, short teenager grabbed his friend by the collar of his coat and pulled him up. Later, he couldn't explain how he managed to pull out his tall friend in waterlogged clothes. Fear multiplied his strength tenfold, and he not only pulled his comrade out, but also dragged him several meters away from the open water. The boys collapsed onto the snow, exhausted, trying to catch their breath. After a few minutes, Michael raised his head and saw James crying, smearing snow and blood from a scrape he got when he fell across his face. "Hey, what's wrong? Did you break something?" James, the boy, was shaking either from the cold or from the experience. "What? A wound? It's just a scratch. Don't whine, you're a boy." "Were those your dad's felt boots? Did you finally get them on?" James croaked. "They've been my dad's forever. They're special somehow. He's going to kill me." "He'll kill you, yeah, but don't whimper, he won't. Come to my place now. You need to dry off, or he'll definitely kill both me and you. Your folks don't like me much as it is, and this way they'll forbid us from being friends altogether." "But how will I go with one felt boot?" At that moment, the 12-year-old teenager remarkably resembled a small, helpless child. He thought for a few minutes. In the end, he took off his own boots and gave them to James, wrapped his own foot in a scarf, and put his friend's wet felt boot on James. In the evening, after drying his clothes as much as possible, James returned home. Aunt Carol guessed from the muddy footprints in the hallway that the boys had gotten into trouble, but she didn't scold them or try to find out what happened. She generally had little interest in her nephew, believing that this way he would become independent and serious faster. And James came down with a severe cold. However, he never admitted what caused it. This was one of their many shared secrets. His parents were never able to find out what had happened. About the missing felt boot, Michael said, "We were trying to dry it on the stove, got distracted playing, didn't notice it burned up." The story was implausible, but James's parents had no choice but to believe it. Aunt Carol, who had taken guardianship of Michael, tried to provide him with shoes and clothes. She simply didn't have time to worry about his moral character, upbringing, or schooling. Even the influence of good friends didn't help. First, he simply stopped informing her where he was going or who he was spending time with. Then he started staying overnight at friends' places. To all her remarks, he replied with the unchanging phrase, "You're not my mother." Michael committed his first theft at 15. James was intensely preparing for exams to military college at this time. The second theft was complicated by an assault on a guard, and Michael, along with his so-called friends, was sent to a juvenile detention center. Despite the fact that he hadn't participated in the assault, the others dragged him along, and he considered backing out cowardly. The friendship, which began in the sandbox and survived many trials, didn't end, but moved to another plane, one of memories and rare letters. James continued to be interested in Michael's life and tell him about his own. Despite the fact that some letters came from a military educational institution and others from a correctional facility, they still found common topics for conversation. Perhaps that's the beauty of youth, that at that time we are able to turn a blind eye to the unimportant and see only the good in people. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison were wary of their son's association with a guy of questionable reputation, but they had long given him the freedom to choose his own friends. He would later give the same freedom of choice to his own children. He would give it, and he wouldn't regret it. A person either learns to take responsibility or learns to shift it onto others, later blaming everyone around him for his life not working out. After college, James entered a military institute, then began a rapid ascent up the career ladder. He got married, and twins were born into the family, a son and a daughter. Life flowed in a calm channel. News from his old friend came less and less frequently until it stopped altogether. In his last letters, Michael practically stopped talking about himself, only once casually mentioning that he was lucky enough to meet a true angel in his life. He himself didn't go into detail, and James decided not to pry into his soul with questions. Through acquaintances, James repeatedly found out that Michael was alive but in prison again. There had been many such stints in his life. It seemed he had become so accustomed to that life that freedom no longer lured him. He didn't know how to settle down, how to earn a living, and was there even any point in reforming? Everything there was familiar and customary. By that time, Mr. and Mrs. Harrison had passed away, and Aunt Carol, who had taken Michael in, hadn't lived long either. Only old acquaintances remained in his hometown, so he rarely visited there. He had considered selling the apartment several times, but there were no buyers at all. Renting it out was also risky. There was no one to travel and look after the tenants, and the probability of running into dishonest people was too high. However, unexpectedly, the former class prefect decided to organize a reunion, and fortunately, James had a short leave at exactly this time. At a family council, it was decided to give the head of the family a couple of days off from worries and send him to his hometown. At the same time, he planned to visit his parents' grave and stop by his class teachers. Catherine didn't go with her husband, as she had urgent business at the shop. September 1st was approaching, which meant the demand for flowers would instantly increase, and it was necessary to order popular items. At the station, transferring to a suburban train to his hometown, James noticed an elderly man who struggled to get into the carriage and sat by the window. Something about his appearance seemed surprisingly familiar. He sat in such a way as to keep the man in sight, observing without attracting attention. The old man seemed significantly younger than his years. James himself was barely 40 at the time, the prime of life, as his wife said. They went to the gym together and enjoyed outdoor activities. Their healthy lifestyle and warm family relationships had a beneficial effect on their appearance. Even among colleagues, James looked significantly younger than many. Most military men, having reached certain heights, stopped taking care of themselves, gained weight, and looked ridiculous during exercises. James always set an example of excellent physical fitness, easily meeting standards. His wife also often attracted men's attention with her toned figure and perfect appearance. Her husband didn't make scenes. On the contrary, he was proud that his wife was a dream and ideal for many. Their children were often told that their parents looked like their older brother and sister. The man James was watching closely looked over 60. Gray hair, hollow cheeks covered with stubble, a hunched back, and a terrible cough. Perhaps the cough more than anything else betrayed his age. There were moments when he was almost suffocating, trying to cough. Every half hour, he would go out into the vestibule, take a drag, hold his breath for a long time, and exhale clouds of acrid smoke. James, who had disliked the smell of tobacco and alcohol since childhood, flinched every time he looked at the man. His father, who had never smoked a cigarette or touched alcohol in his life, had instilled a healthy lifestyle in him. At the same time, he was a model of integrity for his son. Apparently, this man hadn't been so lucky in life, since he found joy in harmful habits that were destroying his health. The strangest thing was that James, who had an excellent memory for faces, couldn't remember this man at all. He had absolutely never seen him before, but there was something familiar about his appearance. The man was returning from the vestibule after another smoke break, and unexpectedly, their eyes met. Surprisingly, the man's eyes were young, although surrounded by a deep network of wrinkles. It seemed he was also struck by the thought that James looked familiar, but his memory or James's appearance was significantly better. Genuine joy lit up his face, and in a rush, he took a few steps forward. Then, as if remembering something, his face changed sharply. He turned around and quickly walked back to the vestibule, and from there, into the next carriage. For a few seconds, James was frozen. Then he almost ran to catch up with the man, not quite believing his eyes. Michael. It was Michael, his childhood friend, the daredevil, the hooligan, and the troublemaker. The one who saved him when he fell through the ice. The one who couldn't live in a state institution and then spent most of his life in places of detention. Aged before his time, hunched, thin, and sick. But it was him. James had no doubt. Despite his completely changed appearance, he recognized his old friend's gaze. Direct, slightly impudent. James practically ran through the next two carriages, scanning the passengers as he went. At that moment, the conductor announced a stop at a station, and James saw through the window that Michael had gotten off the train and was walking quickly towards the village. It was still about half an hour's journey to his hometown, but James couldn't miss the opportunity to talk to his friend. So without hesitation, he jumped off the train step and ran after the receding figure of his comrade. "Hey, stop!" James saw that his friend quickened his pace when he heard his name called. Fortunately, the healthy, physically active man ran fast, and after just a couple of minutes, he caught up with his friend and stopped in front of him, blocking his path. "You recognized me too. Why did you run away?" "Look, buddy, go on. I don't know you," Michael said, trying to walk around him. The smoky, hoarse voice resembled his friend's voice, but James was already doubting. Had he made a mistake? Maybe he wanted so much to believe that upon returning to his hometown, he would meet his old friend, that he had mistaken some stranger who reminded him of Michael from a distance. Less confidently now, he addressed the man again. "Oh, come on. I saw how happy you were to see me there, in the carriage. You couldn't not recognize me. Are you mad that I didn't write? But it's not my fault I didn't know your address. I wrote as much as I could, and then I tried to find out where you were, how you were. I've been living in the same place for many years. Is that what you're mad about?" "Look, buddy, I'm not a woman to get mad. You've mistaken me for someone else." Michael started looking around, as if afraid they would be overheard, and then said more quietly, "You shouldn't be seen near me. Go away. Why do you need problems?" James barely restrained himself from rushing to hug his old friend, despite his warnings. "You old devil. But thank God. I thought I was losing my mind. How are you?" "Pretend you didn't hear the questions. Keep looking around," the man said. "Go to the station. The next commuter train is in an hour. You won't get home from here any other way. Are you going to your parents?" "My parents are gone. 5 years now. It's a shame. They were good people." "Then who are you going to see?" "Them, at the grave. Decided to come for the class reunion. I'll be home tonight if you want. Come over. I'll stop by." With these words, Michael walked on with a quick, as his limp allowed, step, and James went back to the station. What had happened seemed like a dream, or a very fortunate coincidence. It was during his rare visit to his hometown that he was lucky enough to see the person with whom fate had parted him so many years ago. School years flashed through his memory, their friendship with this brave, desperate, and sometimes reckless guy. How many things he had come up with. How many times they had gotten into scrapes because of him. How many times he had brought his friend, hungry as a wolf cub, home and fed him, and Michael would try to take the best pieces with him for his sisters. Yes, Michael's life wasn't easy even in his youth, and it seemed to have severely battered him later. He looked like a real old man. James remembered his 70-year-old father shortly before his death. Michael looked significantly older now. After waiting for the next commuter train, he reached his hometown, and the first thing he did was go to the shop. If his friend came in the evening, he needed to be properly welcomed, just like back in childhood. He remembered that there was a school reunion that day, but he decided it could wait. Michael was more important to him. Besides, his behavior had alarmed James. Calling Lisa, the prefect, he warned her not to expect him at the reunion. Unforeseen important matters had come up. Lisa was noticeably upset. It seemed the whole reunion had been organized just for him. James even remembered that she had shown him attention in school. She was an exemplary girl, mature for her age, while he was still naive about relationships with the opposite sex. Only a military career was on his mind then. Although, when he met his future wife, he decided that this was the girl he would marry someday. In the evening, there was a quiet knock on the door, and almost immediately the door opened, and Michael walked in. "Still haven't learned to lock your doors, just like your parents," Michael smiled, and for a minute, he was again the person James remembered. And they hadn't seen each other for almost a quarter of a century. "Yeah, that's my habit. My wife always scolds me. Less now. She's used to it. Been married a long time. Tell me about yourself." "I'll tell you. Come on in. I've put something together for our unexpected meeting." Michael smiled again, remembering their carefree childhood. "Remember how you always tried to feed me? Couldn't accept that I was thin and small and you were healthy, even though you were younger than me? I remember. I don't know who I got that from. My parents were thin, but I shot up like yeast. Only in college did I discipline myself, started eating less and spending more time on sports. By Military Institute, I was lean and fit. My kids are thin too. Guess I took after the neighbor. Remember the old man who lived on our street, the fat one?" Your parents would love to hear you say that. You always blurt things out without thinking. The friends spent half the evening reminiscing and talking. James noted that Michael immediately went for the bottle, which he, not a drinker himself, had bought just symbolically. Under the influence of alcohol, Michael became more relaxed, even a bit rough, though it was clear he was trying to control himself. At the beginning of the evening, he either avoided questions about his life or answered evasively. After drinking, his tongue loosened, and he recounted the unhappy story of his life. Listen to this. You have a wife, kids, a career, and I have nothing to tell. Just about changing prisons and committing crimes. The only thing I can be proud of is I never harmed a living creature, didn't even touch animals. And thefts. Who among us hasn't committed them? Not everyone got caught. And you know about my first sentences, when I was young and foolish. It was hard in prison then. Scary. I wanted freedom. To my friends, to adventures, to fun. Only that fun led me back behind bars. And life there is not sweet at all. I won't tell you everything. You don't need to know. Only once, one of my cellmates got a letter from his sister, and it had her photo. She was 22, I was 25. You wouldn't believe how many girls I'd been with, but this one just wounded my heart. I asked permission to write, and you won't believe it, she replied. We started writing to each other. I even started behaving well. I was desperate to get out to her. I got out, came to her, but her parents threw me out the door. They didn't know about our correspondence. I spent a month knocking on their door, persuading, convincing. I even got a job to prove I had reformed. But they wouldn't budge. In short, I backed off a bit, decided to give them time. I started living a normal life. That was probably the best year of my entire life. I got a job as a loader, had money. I spent it all on her, bought her gifts. She refused to take them, really, but I had a reason to work, to live a normal life. Her parents only let their guard down 6 months after I arrived, and we started meeting secretly. But everything secret comes out sooner or later. The girl got pregnant. Her parents found out. Termination wasn't possible. It was too late, and her health was poor. In short, they filed a complaint against me, and I went back to the zone. And shortly after, she gave birth to my daughter. I have nothing. I've never seen my daughter, not once. She's almost 15. She doesn't even know my name or who I am at all. Her parents strictly forbade her from telling the girl anything about me. Friends? What friends? When he found out I was going to see her after prison, he ambushed me with his buddies and gave me a beating. Who needs a relative like that? She's smart, beautiful, just graduated from university. The fact that she replied to my letter back then was nothing short of a miracle. Anyway, my daughter grew up without me, and I never managed to fix my life. I just kept drifting, changing zones. Until one day I got a letter from her. She wrote that she was very sick. I lost it, honestly. I had 5 years left on my sentence, and the doctors gave her no more than a year. Do you understand? My beloved. I never loved anyone else, ever. I had no one after her. They all seemed the same, brainless, empty. Anyway, I ran away. I ran away to make it in time to see her. That's why I got scared when I saw you. Nobody here remembers me anymore, and if they do, they probably wouldn't recognize me. Life has battered me. But it's okay. At least I'll live the last few years in freedom. Even if they look for me, I won't surrender alive. I thought I'd lay low, and then I'd figure out how to live. After that, I went straight to her. She lived not far from here. I made it. James saw how difficult the story was for his friend. I made it. I went to her hospital for a whole week. Her parents didn't forbid it anymore. They were old, and I wouldn't have harmed her. But they wouldn't let me near my daughter. They only let me see her from a distance. And they didn't tell her who I was. She passed away. Yes, burned out like a candle. And soon after, both her parents did too. Yes, her mother only survived her by a week. Her heart couldn't take it, and her father by 2. And who is your daughter with now? That's the thing, my friend. My daughter is left alone. She's facing an orphanage. Help me. I'm asking you as a friend. How can I help? I'm nobody to her. Take her under guardianship. Figure something out. Your parents, remember? They bailed me out. They didn't abandon me. But they found relatives. Does your daughter have anyone besides you? And an uncle? I can't. And the uncle drinks. Since he got out of prison, he hasn't been able to live normally. They won't give him the child. I can try to find relatives who can take guardianship of her. Friend, I'll be indebted to you for the rest of my life. Ask for anything. Just don't let her end up in an orphanage. The rest of the evening, the men spent talking about children and how they could help the girl. Michael, weakened and exhausted, quickly got drunk and fell asleep. But James didn't sleep for a long time, turning over and recalling the events of the past day. Besides the issue with the girl, he had to figure out how to tell Catherine and the children everything, how they would react, if they would understand him, if they would judge him for having such a friend. In the end, James concluded that it was best for them to know nothing. He could make inquiries without informing them. However, he needed to act quickly. In the morning, he called everyone who could help in any way. They offered various options, even for him to take the girl under guardianship himself. This option seemed the most sensible. A 15-year-old girl is practically an adult. In a couple of years, she'll be completely independent. He and Catherine would look after her. They'd meet her father. In short, James decided to pursue this direction. He didn't voice his plans to his friend yet. He promised to help, left him some money for the time being, and allowed him to live in his parents' apartment. It had been empty for many years anyway. As for James, it was time for him to go home. So, how was the class reunion? Catherine greeted him as if he hadn't been away for a couple of days, but for a year. Oh, it was fine. Everyone's gotten old, put on weight, become boring. Not much to talk about, he lied. The feeling was disgusting. He didn't lie to his wife. He just thought it was better not to say anything. Why lie to a loved one's face? Not with anyone at all. What about your friend you told me about? We weren't in school with him. He's older than me. Didn't you see him either? No. James lied again. Catherine was surprised that her husband returned thoughtful, quiet, and monosyllabic. He often went out to the stairwell to talk on the phone, constantly received messages. He answered all questions with single words. Like any woman, she decided that he had met some old flame on this trip. Old feelings had flared up, and that's why he was suffering and brooding. She didn't want to think about the fact that he had left home more than 25 years ago and had barely been back since. Finding what seemed to her the most obvious reason, she didn't consider other possibilities. And things with the guardianship of Michael's daughter were going well. James managed to arrange a delay in sending her to a state institution, but he needed to come to the guardianship department urgently and bring documents. He told Catherine he was being sent on a business trip. However, she found train tickets to the same city he had recently gone to for the reunion. The puzzle pieces fit together, and Catherine was finally convinced. Her husband had someone else. And the next day, she saw him in a shop. He was buying clothes, warm teenage clothes. Who could he be buying them for? Their daughter's size was significantly larger. It seemed he not only had an old love somewhere, but also a child. Catherine couldn't bear such betrayal. Her first impulse was to go up to her husband and find out everything. Later, she would regret many times that she hadn't done so, because then she would have saved herself from suffering, uncertainty, and the unknown. But all that would come later. For now, she said nothing to her husband, returned home, and waited for him to come back with explanations. However, as it turned out, patience and meekness had never been her strong suits. So she decided to find out everything herself. Following her husband, she noted the train number and the destination. So she bought a ticket for the same train. To be honest, she regretted giving in to the momentary impulse as soon as she entered the building, but it was too late to turn back. She called the children and warned them that she and their father would be away for a couple of days. David, the more perceptive son, understood from his mother's voice that something was wrong. "Mom, is everything okay? You never go anywhere without us. Dad has a business trip, and I decided to go with him so I wouldn't be bored. I've accumulated some time off work." David pretended to believe her, but his mother's explanation worried him even more. James, unaware that his poor cover story and Catherine's imagination could threaten the existence of their family, anxiously considered his next steps. The best solution would be for his friend to surrender, and then for James to handle the adoption himself. However, Michael firmly stated that he wouldn't go back to prison. James didn't press him, deciding to return to that conversation later. It never occurred to him then how drastically his life would change. For now, he was simply going to meet the girl, his friend's daughter, who didn't even know who her father really was. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, who had reluctantly allowed Michael to spend his last week near the girl's mother, strictly forbade him from seeing their daughter, and they brought the girl to see her mother in such a way that she wouldn't cross paths with her father. James used all his contacts and connections, which turned out not to be so many. Since the girl was already quite grown up, he was allowed to take guardianship of her. However, she could still end up in a state institution at any moment. All the property of her grandparents and mother would pass to her, but she could only formalize the necessary documents after reaching adulthood. For now, she continued to attend school, but social workers came to look after her. As he was told, the girl was very independent, quiet, and modest, like her mother and maternal grandparents, explained Lisa, the acquaintance who was helping with the paperwork. "And do you know who her father is?" "Yes, I do. An old friend of mine. He wrote me a letter asking for help." "And why doesn't he handle the documents himself?" "He's in prison." James didn't lie about the kind of person the girl's father was, but he didn't say that his friend had also escaped. "Wonderful. Where did such a friend come from in your spotless biography?" "As children, we don't choose our friends. We just make them. And then such bonds form that you can't break them. Besides, I owe him my life. Could I really refuse him such a request? Oh, that honesty and integrity of yours will get you into trouble someday. What did your wife say about all this?" "She's not against it. She doesn't know," James admitted honestly. "And honestly, I have no idea how I'm going to tell her everything." "Are you serious? You're taking guardianship of a grown girl who doesn't know you or her father, and recently lost all her relatives. And you haven't even talked to your wife and children. Where will you bring her? Where will she live? What will she wear? How will the school issue be resolved? Connections are good, of course, but I can't cover for you indefinitely. My good advice to you is, talk to your wife and tell her everything. Otherwise, you risk changing your life significantly, and it's not certain it will be for the better." The acquaintance who was helping with the paperwork was Lisa, his former class prefect. Communicating with her was somewhat burdensome for James, as she was subtly hinting at a closer relationship. Therefore, her concern for his family didn't seem sincere, rather the opposite. But there was common sense in her words. Secrets and hidden matters from his wife could ruin their perfect marriage. After this conversation, James really wanted to talk to Catherine, but that evening, his friend called to find out how things were progressing. During the conversation, he coughed terribly. James didn't like the cough and asked his friend directly about his health. "It's bad. That's why I took off. The doctor in there only gave me a couple of months, and then I also found out about her illness. Everything just came together. In short, I'll be following her soon. Thank God I met you then. Through fire. And now I can die in peace, knowing you won't abandon my daughter." After these words, Michael coughed heavily again, and James understood. He needed to go to him urgently, otherwise he might not find him alive. Michael had strictly forbidden him from contacting doctors. James arrived a couple of days later. He didn't tell Catherine. Just then, Lisa also informed him that the guardianship documents were ready, and he could pick up the girl. Only she didn't have warm clothes. She had grown over the summer, and her build was no longer small. The next day, James bought everything necessary and drove to his hometown. He didn't know then that Catherine was traveling with him on the same train, and saw the situation completely differently. In the evening, he and Michael discussed what to do next. "Have you even seen your daughter? Talked to her?" "No, and it's not worth it. This is what I've thought about these past few days. Let's tell her that you're her father." "Right, and my family will kick me out. And nobody will believe it anyway. I lived very far away when she was born. I finished my studies, got my first assignment. The kids were just starting kindergarten, but nobody would believe I could have been running around on the side away from my wife at that time. And I don't want to bring a child into the family and start with a lie. It's better to say I'm a very distant relative. It's also a lie, but at least it won't threaten my family. We'll figure something out." "No, we won't figure anything out ourselves. I'll pick her up tomorrow, bring her here. You'll talk to her and tell her everything yourself." "No." "But why?" James sincerely didn't understand why his friend was so resistant. After all, he had loved the girl's mother, and he would love her too, but circumstances hadn't allowed it. "Because, look at yourself and at me. What kind of father would you want? A handsome and fit officer or a sick, dying convict? You're silent? That's the point. And I don't want her to have a father like that. It would never occur to me to be ashamed of my parents. Because you got parents like that. But I was ashamed from childhood. Always drunk, dirty, abandoning us and my sisters. Even though I lived with Aunt Carol, I still went down the wrong path. And there's no need to even talk about my sisters. They couldn't make it in this life." James didn't ask what his friend meant about his sisters. He barely remembered them. The girls were no more than 5 when they were taken to the state institution, and they never returned home. Michael visited them a few times, but always came back looking like thunder. Life in a state institution was never sweet, and for 2 little girls, even less so. "She didn't have a father at all. They told me she's a quiet and modest girl. Tell her the truth. Don't hide it. It will be easier for you." At that moment, there was a knock at the door, and both men sprang from their seats as if on command. 2 hours earlier, Catherine, following her husband, got off the train at the station. Since she didn't know where he was going, she decided not to lose sight of him. He transferred to a suburban train, and she settled behind him, guessing he was going to his hometown. She had never visited her in-laws, so she was afraid of getting lost in an unfamiliar city. It seemed her husband was so deeply immersed in his own thoughts that he paid no attention to anything around him. A couple of times he almost noticed her, his indifferent gaze sweeping over her. He seemed to have dimmed in a few days, turning from cheerful and lively into thoughtful and gloomy. Seeing her husband enter the building of one of the houses again, and then the apartment on the second floor, Catherine decided to sit on a bench and think. She needed to calm down, collect her thoughts, and decide how to start the conversation and how to explain her presence. After sitting for about half an hour, she decided to go up to the apartment and talk to her husband. After all, sitting here, she wouldn't find out anything. If he was there with a woman, then so be it. They would divorce. She loved her husband, but she would never agree to share him with anyone. Catherine never thought that climbing a couple of dozen steps would be such a difficult task for her. Her legs completely refused to obey, her hands became cold as ice, and her temples began to pound. Gathering her strength, she raised her hand and knocked. Muffled voices could be heard in the apartment, which fell silent after her knock. James and Michael rose as if on command, exchanging silent glances, trying to understand who could be knocking on the apartment door that had been empty for many years. "Are you expecting someone?" James asked quietly. "Are you out of your mind? I didn't even tell anyone where I was going. I've been covering my tracks for months, taking one route, then another. I traveled by suburban trains and buses so they wouldn't track where I was going. In the end, I didn't even stick my nose out of that apartment. Maybe it's someone for you? That prefect of yours who won't leave you alone? Or one of the neighbors?" "Well, maybe, although I didn't really talk to anyone and ask them to call before coming. You hide, and I'll open it. If it's for me, I'll jump off the balcony." "Where are you going? You can barely walk." "Sit still, don't fidget. If it were the police, they probably wouldn't be so polite, knocking on the door and waiting for an answer." Michael naturally decided it was the police coming for him. Rushing to the balcony, he started calculating if he could run after jumping from the second floor. James, realizing what his friend was about to do, silently grabbed him and shoved him into the room that had once been his parents' bedroom. It locked from the inside, and the windows faced a quiet courtyard. "Sit quiet and don't do anything stupid. Maybe some neighbor saw me." "I'm not going back to the zone. I'd rather they take me down trying to arrest me, but I'm not going back there." "Sit quiet. Maybe you'll get lucky." James quietly closed the door and headed for the front door. The peephole didn't allow him to make out the figures, but it was clear it wasn't the police, and they weren't there for his friend. Imagine his surprise when, opening the door, he found Catherine on the doorstep, who had lied so shamelessly about a business trip yesterday and from whom he had been hiding the fact that another child would soon appear in their home for several days. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to ask you the same question. Did you also come on a business trip?" "I did come." Seeing Catherine's eyes, James realized he couldn't and didn't want to lie to her anymore. "Come in. I'll tell you everything now, and then you can decide." Letting Catherine into the house and closing the door behind her, he went to the room and knocked on the bedroom door. "Come out, it's for me. This is my childhood friend. I told you about him," James said, gesturing towards Michael, who was coming out of the room. It was noticeable that Catherine was surprised by Michael's appearance. "You said he was older than you, but I didn't think he was old enough to be your father." "Hello. I'm only 2 years older. Life has just been very hard. Sit down. I'll tell you everything now. Let me just make you some tea. You're frozen." Only now did Catherine notice that she was shaking and her hands hadn't warmed up. Perhaps she hadn't planned on sitting in the cold for half an hour in light clothing. For the next hour, James and Michael took turns telling her about the circumstances that had brought them together in this apartment today. Catherine listened, unable to believe her ears. On the one hand, she was relieved that her fears about having a mistress were unfounded. On the other, she was surprised that her husband had made such an important and responsible decision without informing her. She also honestly told them about her fears and thoughts of him having a mistress. Now that the reason for her husband's mysterious behavior was known, Catherine even felt a little embarrassed about her doubts. "So, my dear, we now have an important decision to make, to take another child into our family. You've already made that decision. We need to decide how to tell the girl who we are and who her real father is. By the way, you haven't called her by name once." "I didn't even know it," Michael said. "They forbade me from even mentioning her name so as not to upset her mother. And she barely spoke due to the medication and hardly recognized me." "I know. They gave me all her details. I just wanted to introduce her to you tomorrow. Well, the girl's name is the same as yours? A whole range of emotions that overwhelmed Michael at that moment was reflected in his eyes. It had been a long time since James had seen men cry. Tough military men, his friends and colleagues, didn't allow themselves such weakness. His father also considered tears a disgrace for a man his whole life. Michael looked at James with eyes full of tears and couldn't hold them back. His beloved, his only beloved, had given their daughter his name. Michael couldn't control his emotions for a long time. Catherine even had to rummage through her purse and find a sedative pill, under the influence of which he quickly fell asleep. And she and James had a long and serious conversation ahead of them. Catherine didn't want arguments, shouting, or scandals. She understood her husband couldn't have acted otherwise, but his secrecy hurt her. He had been silent for so many days, deciding something, inventing things, although he had never before allowed himself secrets from his wife. The only exception was his work. She knew absolutely nothing about it and had never been interested. Otherwise, they had no secrets from each other. Over the long years of marriage, they had managed to maintain a wonderful relationship. They met when he was a cadet at military college. Handsome, tall, athletic, many girls looked at him, but he chose her. She attended a school next to his college. Girls from her class often went to discos and nearby clubs, hoping to meet a handsome cadet. But she wasn't interested in military boys at all and didn't consider herself old enough for dates. He noticed her when she was walking along the embankment with her friends. He singled her out then for her modest appearance. Of all the girls, only she had long hair and a modest dress. However, approaching her turned out to be not the easiest task. He even volunteered to paint the famous red stripes on the monument. That's how the cadets mark their graduation every year. They didn't dare entrust this responsible task to just anyone. Only the most daring took it on. He was one of the proper ones, who were never allowed to do such things. But he wanted to surprise the girl he liked, so he volunteered. When he entered the military institute after graduating from college, the girl plucked up the courage and went to study in the same city. Her parents supported her decision and never regretted allowing their daughter to enter a pedagogical college after 9th grade, after which she went to a university located near the institute he had entered. The young couple decided to get married in their second year. Everyone told them then that such early marriages often ended in separation, but they loved each other so much that they simply ignored such predictions. A year later, twins were born into the young family, a son and a daughter. That's when Catherine fully realized how successful her choice of a life partner had been. Her husband, despite being at work and studying all day, tried to let his wife sleep at night, getting up for the children, changing diapers. He even learned to make formula in a half-asleep state. Contrary to popular belief, maternity leave not only didn't test their bond, it actually strengthened their union. Catherine studied part-time, planned to send the children to kindergarten and go back to work. Her husband suggested she learn some work for pleasure. His career involved periodic relocations, changing garrisons and military units. He managed to get a very good assignment in a large city near the capital. Catherine, with her teaching degree, initially got a job at a local school, but she couldn't bear the complete lack of free time, the workload, the constant complaints from superiors and parents. That's when the courses she took for pleasure came in handy. She found herself in floristry and flower growing. First, she grew a beautiful flower garden at home, and then she learned to arrange bouquets, wrap gifts, and 2 years later, she opened a small flower shop. James was lucky enough to stay at the same duty station for a long time. His wife's business slowly but surely moved uphill. She was able to open 2 more shops and expanded the range. At first, only her husband helped and supported her, and then the children did too. By the age of 40, Catherine looked wonderful, to the envy of her friends. She had a beloved and loving husband and wonderful children. David decided to follow in his father's footsteps, and Emily was studying design. Overall, her life until recently seemed ideal. Friends were openly envious, subordinates never tired of praising and thanking her, and the children delighted her with their successes. And now their marriage was facing a serious test. Catherine was glad that her fears and doubts about his fidelity were unfounded, but the fact that he was ready to change their lives so drastically was disconcerting. She truly didn't understand how they would live on. Essentially, the young girl was a complete stranger to them, and if her husband hadn't agreed to help his old friend, she would have remained a stranger to them. Now, however, they were taking responsibility for another child with her own character, interests, plus having recently lost all her relatives. Catherine also believed that the girl had the right to know her real father, and she and James decided to try again tomorrow to persuade Michael to tell his daughter everything. Fortunately, the issue of finances didn't arise. Their adult children were already partially financially independent. Their parents only gave them money for large purchases. Otherwise, both David and Emily were independent. Catherine tried not to think yet about how they would react to the new family member. James didn't try to justify himself or invent other ways out of the situation. "My dear, I couldn't have done otherwise. He has no one but me. It turns out the girl doesn't either. I didn't tell you because I didn't fully understand what I was getting into myself. Haven't you realized in all these years of marriage that I'm with you in any situation, good or bad? But now it's not just about you and me. It's about the girl who doesn't know us at all. It's about our children, who will now have to accept and love a girl they don't know at all. Not to mention that she might be against moving in with us. She's an adult. She makes that decision herself. By the way, is she ready for a new family?" Lisa, who helped me gather the guardianship documents, said the girl is in a state of shock but isn't against moving. As far as I understand, she's quite withdrawn, quiet. It's still unknown whether that's good or bad. Sometimes it's very difficult to come to an agreement with quiet people. We'll manage, I'm sure. You have no idea how often I thank fate for a wife like you. "You chose me yourself," Catherine said with a smile. "It's late. We need to try to get a couple of hours of sleep. Tomorrow is a difficult day, plus the journey home. By the way, what about your friend? He's very ill. He needs to be in the hospital. The police are looking for him. We can't even call an ambulance. There are wanted posters around the city already. Repeat offender, criminal. And he's just a sick, life-battered, unhappy person who doesn't have much time left. I honestly don't know what to do with him." "I'm not a little child to be worried about," Michael entered unexpectedly, as if he had been standing behind the door for a long time. "And yet, you're right. I need help. You've already helped me, and you owe me nothing more. You paid me back long ago for pulling you out of the ice then. And you didn't owe me anything. You would have gone in after me too if I had fallen. So tomorrow, we'll say goodbye. I'll go somewhere. If I'm alive, I'll write. If not, don't think ill of me." James and Catherine exchanged glances, understanding that arguing was pointless. Indeed, he was in a position to decide how to live his life. But James felt uneasy. "Are you sure you shouldn't tell her? You could tell her without mentioning prison. Say you're very ill. That's why you can't take her yourself." "No, I don't want to. And to lie. It's better to say nothing at all." It was clear the man was hesitating, but James didn't press him. The decision, in any case, was his. The next morning, leaving Michael in the apartment, James and Catherine went to the state institution to pick up the girl. She had been there for several days, as the period for gathering guardianship documents had dragged on a bit, and the welfare officers couldn't leave her alone in the apartment without adult supervision any longer. While they were dealing with the bureaucracy, a short, thin girl quietly entered the room. She looked about 10 or 12 years old. She didn't resemble a 15-year-old teenager at all. Her long, light brown hair was braided. James recognized his friend's features at first glance. The same eyes, build, hair color. Only his friend's gaze was cheerful, a little impudent, while the girl's was sad and thoughtful. She quietly said hello, asked if she could go home to pack her things. Apparently, she had already been informed that she would be living in another city. The girl barely looked up at James and Catherine. The child psychologist who had worked with her after she was admitted to the institution reported that her behavior was just the beginning. The realization of loneliness and the loss of loved ones would come later, and it was difficult to predict how her behavior would be. Having settled all the formalities, the couple ordered a taxi to take the girl to her apartment to collect her belongings. Their departure was scheduled for late evening, so Catherine suggested she visit her friends and say goodbye. "I don't have friends," the girl said quietly. "There's no one to say goodbye to. No one at all. Yes, I had some in elementary school, but then my grandmother enrolled me in music and art school, ballet, and with several tutors. There was no time left for friends, so they decided it wasn't interesting to be friends with me." "How wonderful you are! You dance, play music, and study." "Yes, I guess," the girl said in a colorless voice. It seemed that her activities didn't make her happy at all, and she felt no pride. At home, she packed photos, a few personal items of hers, her mother's, and her grandparents', and clothes. Catherine was surprised that the girl walked past the shelf with numerous medals, cups, and certificates several times without even looking at them, as if she considered them completely insignificant clutter that had no place in a small suitcase. "If you can't fit everything now, we can come back soon to get the rest. I know the way now. I can take you." "It's not necessary. I'll try to take only the essentials." The girl paused for a moment and added, "I was never called anything other than by my full name. If you like, I'll call you that too. You didn't like it when I used a diminutive?" "I don't know. It's just unusual. Do you have children?" The girl showed interest in the people who were to become her family for the first time. "Yes, we have adult children. A son and a daughter. Twins. They are 20 now. David will be in the military, like his father and grandfather, and Emily chose a fashionable field, design. She loved to draw very much, just like you. She went to art school. She had a talent for it from a very young age. I didn't have talent. My grandfather just wanted to load me up like a workhorse. I never liked drawing or dancing. I don't like showing myself in public at all. I'd rather sit quietly in a corner where no one bothers me. I always ask my mom to have a little brother or sister. How wonderful it must be to have a brother or sister, especially from birth. You're born with a best friend right away." "But I wouldn't say they were best friends from birth," Catherine laughed. "Rather, they were born with a partner for mischief and a partner for fights. That's what I meant. I always wanted a big family, but my mom was her parents' only daughter, and I'm hers too." "And do you know anything about your father?" Catherine asked cautiously. "Yes, a little. Actually, Mom told me secretly from Grandpa and Grandma that he was a good person, just got into bad circumstances. He loved her, and she believed that her whole life, and said that he loved me too, even though he couldn't see me." "Did she tell you anything else?" "Only that his name is also the same as mine." "Would you like to meet him?" "Of course. Honestly, I hoped your husband was my father until I found out his name." At that moment, James walked into the room. Seeing him, the girl returned to packing her things. "We'll leave you to it. We won't disturb you. Get ready," Catherine said to the girl, and herself took James by the arm and led him to the kitchen, quietly closing the door behind them. "She knows, both about her father and his name. You showed up at the wrong time. She might have told me something else. The girl is withdrawn, of course. We can't hide from her that her father is alive and nearby." What if he leaves this world, and she never even sees him? I completely agree with you, but what about Michael? Listen, we're going to raise and educate this girl. We need to think about what's best for her. So, as her guardian, I decided to introduce her to her father. But since my general has decided, how can I argue? James smiled, hugging Catherine. An hour later, they were climbing the stairs to James's parents' apartment. A taxi loaded with several suitcases, which the girl had helped pack, was waiting for them by the entrance. Catherine packed everything that could help the girl adapt to her new place. The girl didn't ask why they stopped here. It seemed she was under the influence of sedatives. As the psychologist explained, her psyche had indeed shut down from the outside world to better cope with the loss. Opening her up and pulling her out of this shell would take a long time and require care. Approaching the door, James opened it and asked Catherine and the girl to come in a little later when he called them. Closing the door behind him, he was surprised at how quiet the apartment was, as if no one was there. Walking into the kitchen and room, he found Michael sleeping, lying face to the wall. "Why are you lying down in the middle of the day?" James said quietly and gently touched his friend's shoulder. Michael didn't respond, so James decided to shake him harder and tried to turn him onto his back. However, it was difficult. His friend seemed to have curled up into a tight ball. At that moment, James understood what was wrong. Taking his hand, he tried to find a pulse without much hope. Although from how cold the hand was, it was clear. His friend had quietly passed away in his sleep. Most likely, several hours ago, he had already stiffened. He couldn't let Catherine and the girl see this, so he quickly got up and went out to them on the landing. From her husband's look, Catherine understood. Something bad had happened. Meeting his eyes, he shook his head, explaining everything without words. "I already told you. This is my husband's parents' apartment. He stopped by to pick up some documents. Go down to the car. I'll catch up with you in a moment." Even a younger child would hardly have believed such a ridiculous explanation, but Catherine was incapable of anything more. When the girl slammed the building door shut, she turned to her husband with a question. "Am I going with her alone? Are you staying for the funeral?" "I guess that's what I'll have to do. I don't even know what to do about the fact that he's wanted. God forbid, they'll arrest me for harboring him. Say you came to check the apartment and found him. I don't know what else to say. Try to say as little as possible. He left this morning." James felt a lump rising in his throat. His loved ones were leaving, and he couldn't do anything about it. Perhaps in everyone's life, there comes a moment when a series of losses begins, which is impossible to get used to. Hold on. You need to pull yourself together now. Then you can let your feelings out. We're going to the station. Call when you can. Going downstairs, she found the girl standing by the car. "Can I ask for something?" "Of course, my dear. Anything. Promise not to lie to me." "I promise," Catherine blurted out before she could think. "Why did we come here? Just tell me the truth." Catherine realized she couldn't come up with any more lies. "Your real father lived in this apartment for the last few days. He lived here until this morning. He passed away. Please accept my condolences. We wanted to introduce you, but we didn't make it in time." For a few minutes, the girl was confused and couldn't say anything. Finally, she composed herself and said, "I want to see him. I won't be scared. I need to see him at least once, to remember him. Darling, is it worth it? He's gone." "Are your parents alive?" "My mother is, yes. My father passed away a long time ago." "Did you see him before he died?" "Of course." "Then I want to see him at least once." "All right, let's go into the apartment." They entered quietly. James was already calling the ambulance and the police. He froze with the phone in his hand, falling silent mid-sentence, looking at Catherine questioningly. It's necessary, she told him. She took the girl's hand. Where is he? In the room. Not for long. The police will be here soon. You shouldn't be seen. I'll be quick. Don't worry. Just a look. However, the girl's courage was only enough to cautiously step over the threshold and see the figure on the bed. Crying out, she turned to Catherine and buried her face in her shoulder. Catherine hugged the crying girl and quietly led her out of the room. Then she gently guided her to the car and helped her into the seat. They drove to the station in silence. The girl stopped crying but occasionally wiped away tears with the edge of her collar. Boarding the train didn't take long. Catherine was glad it was already late evening outside. The girl lay down in her seat and soon fell asleep. But Catherine couldn't sleep. Besides the heavy thoughts about their future, worry for her husband was added. He not only had to organize the funeral, but also try to prove his non-involvement in the presence of a fugitive criminal in his parents' apartment. In the morning, the train arrived in the city that had become home to Catherine. She and James had lived here for a long time. Their children had grown up here. There was still a lot of time before the holidays, during which she had to inform the children about the new family member. The girl woke up early but didn't wake Catherine, just lay there and silently looked out the window. Finally, she said, "Do we still have a long way to go?" "No, less than half an hour." "And why did you take me? Who am I to you?" "Your father and my husband were friends since childhood. He asked him to look after you, and my husband couldn't think of anything else but to take you under guardianship. After 18, you'll be completely independent and can decide how to live." Catherine wanted her words to convey that the girl could make important decisions herself, but the girl interpreted them differently. "So you just have to tolerate me for 3 years, and that's it? I can go wherever I please?" "Go wherever you please, my dear. You misunderstood. I only meant that you will become independent, and we will always try to support you. You can count on us, but you can live however you want." "But until you tolerate me and then kick me out? As I understand it, you're not thrilled about the idea of taking in just anyone born. I saw my father. Mom said he was only 3 years older. And that old man I saw yesterday? Who is he? My real father or an old man who somehow ended up in your husband's apartment? What's wrong with him? Was he homeless? Was he in prison? What?" Catherine was struck by the change that had occurred in the girl overnight. Just yesterday, quiet and reserved, today she had become quite sharp and rude. "I'm not sure I'm the one who should tell you all this. Just a couple of days ago, I knew nothing about your father or you, just like you. I actually thought my husband had a mistress in his hometown, and then I saw him buying clothes for you and decided you were his daughter. I bought a train ticket and followed him. And there I met him and your father, and they explained everything to me. To be honest, I was shocked. But I understand my husband. He couldn't have acted otherwise. And that means we all have to accept this fact and learn to live together. To conflict or to learn to cooperate. That's your decision. You are an adult. We will provide you with an adequate quality of life, but how our communication will be depends only on you." It seemed such a direct answer, somewhat calmed the girl's rising anger, especially since Catherine had been warned that such a reaction was normal. Perhaps it would be easier for the girl to cope with the pain of losing her loved ones this way. And she, as an adult, had to support her. It was amazing how quickly a complete stranger could become close. Just yesterday, Catherine had absolutely no desire to take a stranger's child into the family, and today she felt so sorry for the girl that she couldn't leave her alone without support in this difficult world. Catherine gently took the girl's hand and said, "I know you're angry at everyone, including us, for how cruelly fate has treated you. If you need to, be angry. Let out your emotions. But don't let hatred grow inside you towards us. We sincerely want to help you. As soon as you turn 18, you can claim your parents' property and move out. Until then, we all need to learn to live together. And you won't abandon me? The girl's voice trembled. It seemed she was about to cry. No, we won't abandon you. If it depends only on us. Your parents didn't abandon you either. They left against their will. Tell me about my father, please. My dear, I can't. I know almost nothing about him. I can only say he was very ill. That's why he looked that way. Your guardian can tell you more. They were friends since childhood. I remember him telling me how your father saved his life. Really? How? Tell me. We've arrived. Let me tell you that story at home, and tomorrow we'll go and get you enrolled in school. I never thought I'd go back there again. Did your children study there? Yes, and it's a good school, with strong, experienced teachers. My children even got into the universities they chose without tutors. And I had a good school too, but Grandpa and Grandma still hired a bunch of tutors for me. They cared about you. They wanted you to have a wealth of knowledge from childhood and not turn out like your father. I once overheard their conversation. He said he would pay any money for tutors, put me in any schools and clubs, just so my father's genes wouldn't show, and yet he only wished the best for you. It's just that sometimes adults, wanting to do something good, go a little overboard, not considering the child's wishes. They didn't arrive home until noon. Catherine called the shop and warned them she would be away for a couple of days. She took time off. Her deputy was surprised but didn't ask questions. In all the time they had worked together, she had only taken sudden days off a couple of times. She loved her work very much and dedicated a lot of time to it, and Catherine decided to spend this day with the girl to help her adapt at least a little. James didn't call. This was starting to worry her. She was afraid to call herself, afraid of hearing something bad. In the evening, she decided to call the children and inform them that a new member had appeared in the family. She called David first. For some reason, it was always easier for her to talk things through with men. David's first reaction was unexpected. "Mom, are you sure this is a good idea? A grown girl with such psychological trauma? What could come of this? You and Dad were never known for harshness or strictness in raising us. The fact that my sister and I turned out this way is only because of your example. But we grew up with you, and this girl didn't. She was raised strictly. What will happen when she feels you won't be so strict? 15 is the most difficult age, even when everything in life is calm. And she lost her whole family." David seemed to voice all her hidden fears. She herself understood everything her son was telling her, understood and feared it. Therefore, she decided to be a little stricter with the girl at first, so she wouldn't take advantage. Emily, her twin sister, supported her brother's concerns. She was the more energetic, feisty one in their pair, sometimes even defending her brother. But here she completely agreed with him. The girl needed to be accustomed to freedom gradually, otherwise she would harm herself. Catherine was surprised that the children didn't oppose their parents' decision, didn't ask unnecessary questions. Apparently, they had long been accustomed to their parents making only well-considered and deliberate decisions. Moreover, their mother said it was their father's decision, which meant arguing was useless. In the evening, James called. His voice sounded very tired. After Catherine and the girl left, he waited for the ambulance and the police, informing them that he had found an unknown man in the apartment. The death was natural, so the police didn't show much interest in the discovery. However, after lunch, the investigator called and invited him to come in. Can you imagine? He invited me. Apparently, professional ethics have reached our valiant police too. Anyway, they told me the deceased was my friend. He escaped from prison. He came to the apartment, apparently, because he had nowhere else to go. So, I took care of the funeral. Nobody was surprised, especially since I said we were friends in childhood. I'm leaving tomorrow after lunch. The police have no questions for me, no reason for an investigation, and no grounds to cause me problems. Thank God. I was so worried. How are things with you? David called me, shared his concerns. I called both of them. They accepted our decision unexpectedly easily, but both said to be stricter with the girl at first. I agree with them, although it's not our method. However, Catherine couldn't follow the advice. In the evening, the girl asked to go for a walk. Catherine offered to accompany her, but she categorically refused, saying she was already grown up and wouldn't be out for long or go far. I won't go far enough from home to get lost. You have my phone number, and I remember your address. All right, but try to be back by 7 in the evening. I know it's early, but you don't know the city. Besides, our neighborhood isn't the safest. Even though you're quite grown up, you look very small. When I first saw you, I thought you were no more than 12. Be careful. Or would you like me to walk with you? No, I want to be alone for a bit. Okay, but try to keep your phone on. The girl nodded and left the apartment. After 7 in the evening, Catherine decided to call herself. The girl's phone was off. After half an hour of fruitless calls, Catherine decided to go look for her. It was already getting dark outside. The few passers-by hurried home, pulling their collars tight against the biting wind. After circling the building, all the nearby squares and courtyards, Catherine decided to call her husband. He should have just gotten on the train home. Darling, what's wrong? She's gone. She asked to walk around the neighborhood. We agreed she'd be back by 7 and her phone would be on. It's 8:30 now, and her phone is off. Should I go to the police? They won't even take a report from you. I think this is her way of testing the boundaries. This is exactly what we talked about. We can't let her run the show, or we won't be able to handle it. I'll be home in the morning, and we'll find her together if she doesn't come back sooner. However, even in the morning after James's arrival, there was no news from the girl. They decided to go to the police, as the girl didn't know the city and could be in trouble. James asked Catherine to wait for him outside, and he went in to speak with the investigator. Listen, could you possibly give me the addresses of places in our city where young people gather? But you said the girl is quiet and modest? The girl was only taken from a state institution yesterday, and before that, she grew up under total strictness. I see. I'll look now. We have quite a few such places, to be honest. It would be good if she didn't end up there. Our local troublemakers quickly turn such sheltered girls into homeless ones. Try to keep a better eye on the child. Having received a printout of addresses, James and Catherine decided to start looking for the girl themselves. After visiting several addresses, they realized how incredibly lucky they were with their own children. Not once had their children caused them such intense worry. Both had grown up active, but not reckless, of course. Like all teenagers, they got into different situations, but their parents never had to look for them in such places or go to the police. James waited for Catherine to say that he had started all this and dragged her into it, but she, as in many other situations, was supportive and tried to help. They had taken on this responsibility together. Blaming her husband was pointless. In one of the courtyards, on a bench, they found the girl sleeping. They had to make an effort to wake her up. To their surprise, she didn't smell of alcohol. As she explained later, she had simply decided to walk and had wandered around the city for almost 24 hours until she fell asleep from exhaustion on the nearest bench. She had turned off her phone on purpose. She wanted to be alone and think. Didn't you think we would worry? I did. I won't apologize. With these words, she turned away to the window and remained silent until they reached home. At home, James decided to talk to her himself. You said you asked about your father. Well, listen. I have never seen a more honest and fair person, ready to go through fire and water for a friend. He himself was willing to go without eating for days just to bring something tasty to his sisters. He pulled me out of the icy water, although he himself could have died, as he was half my size. He had a hard life, got in with a bad crowd, ended up in prison. Yes, your father was a criminal, but he knew how to admit his mistakes. In that, you are definitely not like him. I don't see his honesty in you, his openness, his gratitude for kindness, none of what I valued and loved him for so much. If you want to live with us, you must live by our rules. Call so we don't worry, keep your promises, listen, be respectful. I understand you're not thrilled about the idea of living with strangers. If it's that difficult for you, I'll take you back to the state institution. Just 3 years, and you're free. Go wherever you want, you're your own boss. But if you want a family, loved ones, support, and love, learn to adapt. We didn't force our children to be obedient. They learned from our example. David and Emily are not against you living with us. Catherine and I are ready to give you our attention and care. But if you're going to leave whenever you feel like it, not answer your phone, and then not apologize, don't unpack your things. We'll go back. I'll give you an hour. Think about it. I'm not rushing you, not persuading you, but you either accept our conditions or you don't. With these words, he walked out and closed the door behind him, not allowing the girl to say a word. The hour they gave her to think felt agonizingly long. They could hear her walking around the room, opening and closing the suitcase several times, moving a chair. Catherine and James sat silently in the kitchen, exchanging glances at every sound coming from the room. Finally, Catherine said, "Are you sure this is the right way? It's time for her to learn to make decisions. Before, adults did it for her. But at some point, you have to grow up. Some people take many years, while others grow up in a couple of weeks. Her father, it seemed to me, wasn't a child from childhood. He was responsible for his sisters. I won't judge what happened to him in the years we didn't see each other, but I remember him being mature beyond his years. By the way, I found out what happened to his parents and sisters. When the children were taken away, the parents went on a prolonged drinking spree in their joy, froze the house's heating system, and froze to death. I was about 12 then. The adults didn't tell us, and they didn't tell Michael the truth when he escaped from the state institution. They lied that the parents had moved. And his sisters? His sisters repeated their parents' fate. After the state institution, they found partners like themselves. Michael casually mentioned that their lives didn't work out. In short, both are alive, but they lead a lifestyle that is, to put it mildly, dishonest. Both have children in state institutions, so she has at least 3 cousins. How did you find that out? The neighbor told me. She recognized me when I was explaining to the police how my friend could have ended up in my parents' apartment. A cunning old woman, by the way. She immediately understood I was lying to them. She saw me arrive with him and saw me carrying groceries, but she didn't turn us in. So she told me everything. By the way, they all live not far from here. We'll see what the girl decides. Maybe we'll tell her about her relatives. You don't need to. I heard everything. It turned out the girl had been standing behind the door for a long time and heard the entire conversation. I don't want to live like my father's family. I am ready to abide by all your conditions, especially since yours are even milder than Grandpa's were. Only Mom used to spoil me. Forgive me. I don't know what came over me. You owe me absolutely nothing and could have left me in the state institution. 5 years passed. The girl graduated from school with honors and entered a pedagogical institute, majoring in sociology and social work. She wanted to help children like her father had been, help and protect them from the conditions they ended up in, give them a chance to become normal people. She kept the promise she made to her guardians. There wasn't a single problem with her. She studied, tried hard, listened, didn't talk back. Gradually, she became like family to them. David and Emily also accepted the girl quite warmly. Emily became friends with her younger sister, often helped her choose outfits, and the girls went on vacation together a couple of times. David took a long time to accept the girl, treating her cautiously, expecting trouble. However, gradually he also softened. The fact that he got married while still studying and had a son greatly contributed to this. "You've become a softie," his sister often told him, teasing her brother without malice, who could talk for hours excitedly about what his child could do. "You just haven't been in my shoes. When you have your own, you'll become just as much of a softie, I assure you." "Oh no, I don't want to be stuck with diapers and bottles from a young age. My career and travel come first. But if I feel like having a small child smear porridge on me, I'll gladly use my nephew." In fact, the girl adored the baby and spared neither money nor time for his whims. In all the years, the guardians never regretted taking the girl into their family. After the children finished school and moved out, the house seemed empty and quiet. Even though they both had jobs they loved, the need to care for someone was felt very acutely. By the time the girl finished school and moved out, a grandson had appeared in David's family, whom the happy grandparents often took in, giving the young parents a little break. They remembered how hard it had been for them without parental help with twins during their student years. The girl couldn't find the strength to meet her father's relatives for several years. Neither of his sisters showed any interest in her, but their children were very happy to have normal relatives besides their parents. The girl tried to visit them often, give small gifts, and tell them about herself and her life. She often recalled her first day in their family. Then she was faced with a choice: a calm life in a family with trust, mutual respect, consideration of interests, love, understanding, or a state institution. In the couple of weeks she spent in that institution, she understood that she had to strive to leave it, not return. She chose the family and never regretted it. Despite growing up in a family with a different way of life, she was able to adopt the family values that her new parents instilled in her. When she met a wonderful young man a few years later and decided to marry him, the first thing she did was bring him to her guardians so they could evaluate him from the perspective of their life experience. Both Catherine and James liked the young man. Gradually, life returned to its usual course, becoming quiet and peaceful.